please welcome the moderator for this session, Michaela Küfner.
Thank you very much for that applause ahead of a debate for the automotive industry here in Europe at a crossroads, which is a very diplomatic way of putting it. And to debate the various aspects of that, I'm very pleased to welcome Cecilia Malmström, the former EU Trade Commissioner. She says, please take a seat here. She says China is not playing fair when it comes to subsidies, but she blames European car makers who've not been able to produce high quality, affordable electric cars. Welcome.
Thank you.
Brian Gu is with us. He's the vice chairman of the board and co-president of XPeng, an EV manufacturer in China. He says tariff is a tool used by nations for trading balancing, but they are not necessarily effective in driving long-term growth and innovation. So thank you for being here today. We have with us the German Vice Chancellor and Trade Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Robert Habeck. Please come to the stage. No? There? I've taken a previous quote from you. You say it's important to understand that these are not punitive tariffs that the EU is debating, and you stress that joint and equal standards for market access are what all sides should be talking about. Also with us is Ola Källenius, as the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, also coming from a finance background. Your applause. And you say that free world trade is very important, drives innovation, drives growth. Instead of creating new tariffs, we should rather work to reduce existing trade barriers in the spirit of the WTO. So I very much look forward to that debate. We will probably all remember this debate today, but we will also remember this as the day when Israel was attacked by Iran, and also the day that Israel decided to declare the UN Secretary General a persona non grata in the country. So as Vice Chancellor, Mr. Habeck, I would like to give you the chance to just give your initial reaction to what we've seen unfold over essentially the past 24 hours.
Well, first of all, as a German politician, I have to remember, to remind everyone that the existence of Israel, the sheer existence of Israel, is due to the deeds of my forefathers and so many other forefathers here in this country. So there is the need for solidarity with Israel deep in the German political, attitude. And of course, the threat against Israel is tremendous. In the past 2 years, we have seen it happening on the ground there. Now, in this concrete situation, we have to use all the strengths we have to ease the conflict. Means diplomatic needs to be in the background and in the foreground. Everywhere the situation, I think everyone would agree that it's really, really dangerous as the escalation is now could happen shortly. And so I think everyone is advised or would act wisely if he or she uses all his influence to calm down the situation in the Near East.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to make sure that we don't create our own bubble here on such a day that will no doubt be historic. This today is a continuation of a discussion that we actually started, you, Mr. Källenius, and Robert Habeck last year, exactly at this table when the whole debate about potential tariffs actually began. And I do remember you, Mr. Källenius, laying out why Mercedes has no interest in such tariffs. In fact, you must still be feeling the jet lag coming back from China. And the Chinese are very much interested in you representing the case. So I would first like to hear from you, Robert Habeck. We are expecting a vote on Friday. Germany is Europe's largest economy. Where will Germany throw its weight on that?
Well, it's Friday, and now we have Wednesday, so there's 2 days to...
It's a long time in politics, that's true.
Well, yeah, it's a long... Actually, that is the case. But in the end, I would agree with everyone who says that tariffs are not the answer. Of course, as a market-driven and export-orientated nation, we have to take care that level playing field and all the rules are in place, and also everyone is playing to the rules. There also I have doubts, but my bigger concern as Minister for Economic Affairs of this country is that I see now a development of new trade barriers everywhere. So tariffs are not only invented, or the threat of inventing tariffs and the potential counteraction from China is not only happening in Europe. I see the colleague from Brazil. Brazil has given tariffs on Chinese cars. The US 100%. Turkey has done it. India has done it. There are local content rules all over the place, happening everywhere. If we are honest, we see that the phase of open market globalization is entering a new stage. I wouldn't say that globalization is over, but the belief, the maybe naive belief that an open world where a trade is bringing countries together has definitely come to a new phase. And we see that interest, economic interest, become power interest, and power interest become sometimes also real conflict reasons now. So I'm really worried that this debate, beyond the background of a broader scene, is part of a bad development, but the development is there, and that is bad for China and for Europe as well, as we need open markets.
So what does that mean in actual terms? Will Germany vote in favor of increasing?
That means actually that I think that tariffs might in some cases be necessary, but we need a political solution here. In this concrete case, and in other cases as well. Political solutions means, translated, that politicians let it just not happen and look and see, okay, now it's coming out of the bureaucracy or the apparatus. One word is giving another, and then we have tariffs everywhere. You started, we answer, they answer to our answer, and then it's escalation. So that is not the right way. So, I mean, we are in a process. I was in China, how long is it now ago? Maybe 3 or 4 months ago. There, if I be blunt, the first reaction was, there's no problem. And then after long talks, we understood each other's positions. Then the colleague Meng Wentao came to Berlin and also to Europe and the rest of many other countries 2 weeks ago. Completely different scene. Now there's an openness. China has made a proposal to solve this conflict politically. Now I'm asking the EU to be open for this discussion. The EU understands that negotiations are a good thing, that now there's development. Maybe a little bit late. There's 1 month to go until the real tariff decision is taken place, and then they would come into action. But as you just said, 2 days is a long time, and 1 month is a really long time. So if everyone wants to contribute, of course, it's possible to find common ground there. And I think this is the motto of the conference, common ground.
That clearly is also an issue that the EU is grappling with. Ola Källenius, so how do you read that answer now? What do you make of that? What would be your expectation? And you've just been to China. You met with the chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission, Zheng Shenji, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who clearly appreciates Mercedes as the, I'd say, jewel in the crown of German automotive industry seen worldwide, being what he perceives on his side.
In this particular discussion, Mercedes-Benz is in a position where we can see it from both sides. Because on the one hand, of course, we're a German company. We export not just to China, we export around the world, and we're dependent on access to markets as free as possible. Although I acknowledge that the landscape, as Minister Habeck is describing, that the landscape over the last 5, 6, 7 years has not turned for the better. I think that's the realism that one must have. But we're also a company with large operations in China for China, but also through joint venture in China for Europe. So in a way, I'm looking at my esteemed colleague here from XPeng. In a way, we're the same. We're both exporting from China to Europe, and I'm looking at the assessment of the Commission, what they think they should do to those exports in terms of adding on top of the 10%, another significant number above that. And I'm scratching my head thinking to myself, what do they want to do? Do they want to destroy my business model and make it economically not viable? Because I cannot get the math to compute for us as a manufacturer in China exporting to Europe, even though our exports from Europe to China in terms of their size are much bigger. So in that situation, I represent a company. I don't represent a country or an economic region, but I represent a company. And you go through and think, is there a better solution? And I believe there is a better solution. The minister alluded to it. Straight tariffs is a very crude instrument to use. There are many other ways, if there is political will, to make sure that the playing field is level. And I cannot look into the head of the negotiators. As you said, if you have 1 month to negotiate, it's an eternity. And,
if you use it.
Yeah, if you use it. If you don't use it, it can be over in 5 minutes. Posturing is part of negotiation. Of course it is. But do I believe, and I would like to take an optimistic view, do I believe that there is a solution space based upon the conversations that we have had with, involved people? I do believe there is a solution space. I genuinely believe that China has not an interest in the situation that they are in economically and with what's going on with the United States. I don't think they have an interest to get into any kind of escalating trade conflict with Europe. So I think the incentive for them to find a solution is relatively high. So can the time that is now available be used to find that solution space, yes or no? That's the question. I'm going to take an optimistic view and say it is yes. With regard to Friday, if I were Germany, I would vote no. Not to weaken our negotiating position, but to send a signal that we want to negotiate for a fair win-win solution with a level playing field that should be possible.
So will you vote no?
Well, Mr. Källenius described it rightly. The way, maybe we have to talk a little bit about China, and that is...
We're getting to it.
Yeah, but it's important because you can't only look at the automotive sector in particular. And I don't know if I should do it, but I think that China, you would correct me if you think otherwise, they have changed, they have spoken it out loudly with China 2025, a very aggressive strategy for exports. That is, of course, all right. I'm the German Minister for Economic Affairs. We are also an export nation. The question is, do they get the capacity for export products by level playing field, or is it a subsidized over capacity for exports? And if that would be the case, then we have a problem. Then we won't have a level playing field. So there is reason for distrust in a way, because we see it everywhere that the products are sometimes under the price of the production, at least the price that European companies can achieve. I'm coming back to the automotive sector in a minute, but we're talking about, we have problems with 2 Chinese, fashion companies or selling companies, Temu and Shein, and the products are they're not at all fitting to the regulations of the European product standards. So at least they should not enter the European market. So but still they are there and very aggressively now a threat to our inner cities because they are so cheap. So I think the broader picture tells us that China has a new strategy, or maybe a prepared but now existing strategy. And of course, if this strategy is not cooperation but or competition, which would be fine, but overtaking whole markets like it has happened with the solar panel industry, then we have a problem. Then also in 10 years' time, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volkswagen, they would also have a problem. And there are reasons to see that this could happen. So with this, this is very, very, I let it be there. So now the question is, if that should not happen, and maybe China really has no interest that this is going to happen because the world becomes more fragmented and all, and if the European market really closes in, like the US market is closing in for China, then the Chinese economy maybe has also a problem. So now the question is, do we find enough room for maneuver to understand that this situation, this situation is part of a bigger picture? And then the question is, how can Europe align and speak out as a union, as what it is? And that is the question, what is the most successful way to find a political solution in this concrete situation? And that leads to the question, how do we vote?
Brian, I'll get your perspective from a Chinese perspective in a second. But Cecilia, I first want to ask you, are you getting flashbacks from your former role as EU Commissioner?
Absolutely.
In terms of the bigger picture, that used to be your role. When you're listening to these perspectives, what do you make of that? And what would your recommendation be, how this solution should look like?
Well, it's not easy to see a quick solution, but it is, of course, a bigger picture. There's a political pressure from many countries who have car industry and who feel that they cannot compete today, and the Commission has done an investigation. I think it's clear that China is subsidizing their car industry in a way that is not respecting the level playing field. And then, of course, there has to be a decision. I am not in the Commission anymore. I left it 5 years ago. So I don't think the tariffs are the right solution right now. I don't think it will help European industry. But the big question is, of course, how should the relationship be with China? But also, how can European car vehicle industry catch up? Because we have joint commitments to transition in the net zero carbon economy. We know that citizens want electric cars that are affordable, that are high quality. China can deliver them today. Europe can obviously not deliver them to that extent. So it's a bigger picture on that. But I think that that is why probably there will be a decision on Friday to impose the tariffs, and from there continue the discussions on China. I think this morning the negotiator says that the discussion doesn't end on Friday, whatever the outcome. There will be a decision to see, can we come with a solution? Can Europe find a solution together with China? Can there be minimum prices? Can there be a way to put this forward? But then, of course, we need to have the discussion and the conversation within the European car industry, not only in Germany, but also all over the continent.
How are you observing this debate? You're from a manufacturer who's very software heavy. You've just been invested in heavily by Volkswagen in order to essentially help them meet consumers' needs and wants, who are increasingly perceiving vehicles as a personal space, essentially a computer on wheels. So when you're hearing this debate, what crosses your mind?
Well, first of all, I'm very honored to be on this table. As a very young company, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary this year. To participate in a debate like this is very, I would say, humbling. I would say, first of all, I cannot say I represent China or Chinese industry, but I can probably give you the perspective of a young Chinese EV startup company that has went through the journey of a fierce competition in China. In the last 10 years, most of you probably know that what happened in China was tremendous focus and competition. In fact, I think there were rumored to be close to 500 EV startups probably 7-8 years ago, and now left with less than 10% of these names still in business. And that level of competition really resulted in the industry today, which is highly efficient, highly innovative, and also producing, exporting technology and products to the rest of the world. So the way we look at this, obviously from a company's perspective, we always want to have a fair level playing field for the Chinese company to compete globally. In Europe, and we just entered Europe this year with probably close to a dozen or so markets. And I think we are coming not because we're the cheap alternative to existing products. We want to bring the best technology that have developed in a highly competitive and iterative Chinese market to European customers and make them also enjoy the best-in-class technology and at more affordable prices. In fact, our cheapest product selling in Europe is actually comparable in terms of price to the Model Y from Tesla. And our other products are actually more expensive than that. So we're actually providing products based on what we believe are a value proposition with technology, design, and quality. So with that, I think we would love to have the ability to access the European market, access the customers who are embracing new technology, embracing the energy transition, embracing products that can help the green agenda. At the same time, I think we also, as a young company, has global aspirations. We want to be like Mercedes. We want to be like Toyota's maybe 50, 60 years ago, like the Koreans 30, 40 years ago, to build a global business over time. And we'd like to have an environment that's conducive to that.
Ola Källenius, I would like to ask you, I mean, Volkswagen is in deep trouble in Germany. I'm sure it's taking up a lot of your time right now as well. Then you had to put out a profit warning as well. Your shares dipped instantly. What is the structural challenge that European automakers, particularly German automakers, are not meeting appropriately because they are just about making the top 10 when it's about EV vehicles?
There are two things going on in China from my point of view, and you described one of them. But let's start on the macro level. Yes, we have the biggest footprint in the premium luxury segment in China. And if you look at our market share development over the last, 18 months or so, not only have we defended market share, in some cases we've actually built our market share in the upper segments of the Chinese car market. Then you can ask, so what's the problem then? Everything's fine, right? What's happening in China is we have on the consumer side, in terms of consumer sentiment, and also on the part of the entrepreneurs, we have a very, I'm going to put it mildly, subdued atmosphere, which means the confidence in the future, you can see it in the savings rate now being above 30%. I mean, it's unbelievable. The sentiment right now on most entrepreneurs and consumers that are buying goods in the higher end, higher expensive capital goods or even luxury goods is very cautious. So that part, you're even nodding your head, you know that you could be a potential customer for Mercedes. That market has been shrinking at a worryingly rate. We know about the restructuring of the real estate sector. For many people in the US, you have your 401k for your retirements. In China, you have an apartment. If the equity value of that apartment over the last 24 months has gone down by 30%, you don't feel flush. You don't go out and buy an S-Class. I speak a lot to entrepreneurs such as you and talk to them. They're all waiting and watching. Now we saw last week that the government put out, by Chinese standards, a very unusual move, something that many of the Western economic advisors have been asking for. You need to do something about your demand side. You need to start building confidence. You need to break through this confidence crisis and get people to consume again and not just look at the production side of things. I saw the stock exchange went up by 20% inside a few days. And one of my friends in Shanghai said, "Oh, I'm at the mall here. There's a line in front of Louis Vuitton. It seems to be working." And I was writing back and said, "Well, I hope there's a line in front of the Mercedes store next door." Can China break that confidence crisis? That is the most important thing for us from a business point of view in the short to mid-term. In the long term, the most important thing for us is our competitiveness. Can we, in this most competitive market in the world, make sure that we stay ahead on product, innovation, technology, design, all of those things that make a Mercedes-Benz a Mercedes-Benz? That's our job. And we're investing double-digit billions into that and have with zero arrogance, cautious optimism that we can be in the leading pack of that also in China, not just around the world, but also in China. One thing you have to realize also about driving market demand, if you're a consumer in China and the entry to middle sector, actually an electric vehicle for the consumer is cheaper to buy than a combustion vehicle, even though the cost structure is higher. It's strange. It's a Darwinistic-like price war, market purification. And many of those players that are around now, many of those are not going to be around 5 years from now. In that market consolidating phase, you have cash burn and value destruction that even affects companies that sit at the upper end of the pyramid because you cannot release yourself from the market. That's the situation. But it's not the situation to sit back and go like, oh, and then be paralyzed. You must control your nerves, keep on investing, keep on innovating, and make sure at the end of that Darwinian battle that you're one of the combatants that are left. And that's what we're focusing on.
Just to fact check, there's 2 G-class vehicles outside. There's still a waiting list for those, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yes. So if I could afford it, I would have used this opportunity, of course. But that raises, of course, the question of the bigger picture, of the infrastructure that that you're operating in and that you're putting products into. Because your point is we are essentially feeling the effects of a Darwinistic competition that's fiercely taking place in China as well. So what's your advice to this key industry that makes up 7% of the EU GDP at this moment in time? Because you've been quite clear in the quote that you gave me that you feel that the automakers with great tradition and great brands aren't fit for it.
Well, I wouldn't say not fit for it, but of course, I wouldn't be able to give advice to the auto industry. It's a very important industry for Europe, for jobs, for our competitiveness, for prosperity, etc. But we also have the bigger picture, which is climate, and Minister represents the Green Party, and we have a commitment to future generations to do this transition, and the car industry in Europe is not doing it quick enough. So the question is, what can we do jointly to speed up from the car industry side, from the decision maker side, from the infrastructure side, everything from charging devices to setting up goals and making sure that consumers are incentivized to choose electric vehicles. That's the discussion we should be having, and I hope that could continue. Also, I mean, I understand that the decision on Friday is very important, obviously, but there will be a continuation, whatever happens, that there will be a discussion with China, and these problems and the problems of competitiveness for the European car industry as a whole will not disappear. So where do you want to go?
I want to take this to the whole question of CO2 neutrality, because that's a common goal the EU is working towards. And I could actually keep asking questions all day. I just want to flag out to everybody, I know you all have questions. It would just be great if you make yourself seen so we can get your questions asked here as well. So please take a moment to consider, and then, yeah, and in a moment we'll come to our young voices as well. But I just want to ask a question first to you, Minister Habeck. You are a green politician. You had launched essentially a consumer subsidy for buying e-vehicles, which then abruptly ended because it essentially was, you ran out of cash, frankly. And you are at the same time saying, or I don't know, maybe you can map it out here, what you feel is most needed or what you will provide for the auto industry. Because in the good old days, someone like Ola Källenius, there wouldn't be virtual auto summits like you had last week. There would be physical summits with Angela Merkel at the Chancellery, and German automakers would come out with one help or the other. You've left that open after this virtual gathering, so maybe you can give us an insight into what step Germany will be taking to create that demand that Ola Källenius is so craving for.
Yeah, but first of all, I'd like to use also this occasion that to remind everyone that I would say all of the automotive industries reduced their prices after the subsidy scheme, the German subsidy scheme, suddenly was gone. That was a shame. I mean, the money was gone. There was a constitutional court saying that took away 60 billion out of the budget we had planned for that. So that was.
But still, the sales still dropped. I mean,
more or less in the same amount of reduction by the public subsidy scheme, the automotive industries gave the same amount of reduction to the customers. So if you are saying, I won't buy electric vehicle because these Umweltbonus, it was called, is gone, you are wrong. And if you look at the OPEX cost by driving electric vehicle, if you do it rightly, or normally I would say using a wall box or maybe having your own solar power system on the roof, you save money by the year. So really you can, it's cheaper, in many cases I have to say, it's cheaper to have an electric vehicle than to buy a combustion engine. Still, there's you explained it for China. I think that is very similar in Europe and also in Germany. There's an uncertainty which way to go. That has also the reason of the political debate. But that, I think, you pointed out very rightly, the way for climate neutrality in transportation is clear, or we lose the way to climate neutrality in Europe as a whole. I mean, the European Union decided that we have to become climate neutral in 2050, Germany 2045. The way or the calculation why there should be only climate neutral cars in 2035 is that you drive a car 15 years, so roughly speaking, more or less. So if you want to have climate neutrality in all sectors in 2050, you need only climate neutral cars coming to the market in 2035. Now, of course, it's not black and white or 1-0. It takes some time to increase the production capacity. That is the meaning of the increase of electric vehicles on European streets from now on till 2035. If we are pushing 2035 away, then we are pushing 2050 away. There is no climate neutrality in 2050 achievable if the transportation sector is not delivering. Then, of course, you can argue, okay, this is only Europe, then where's the problem if we become climate neutral in 2060? Well, the problem is that nobody then will hold its promise to become climate neutral. So this small question that is part of the political debate before election campaigns or for the European Parliament is really hitting the core of the question, do we stick up to the promise to become climate neutral? And of course, this promise was not only given by politicians, but by the investments of the companies. At least some of the companies invested billions of billions. So if you ask Volkswagen now, what is they have some problems in the structure and they have pricing problem and so on. But if they have one wish for politicians, they are saying, stick to the plan. Stop the talking that all our investments are going to shed us, because now after you have made the rules, you have made the laws, you have made the promise also to future generations, you have to keep the promise. This is destroying our business case. That is the first answer you get. Stop questioning what was decided in a broad coalition. It was the great coalition, Social Democrats and Conservatives. Of course, my party agreed to that. It was across the aisle that this was agreed on, and the companies need the trust that this is still the plan. So that is the first thing. And this costs nothing. Just stop stupid talking. That is priceless, I would say. So
do you agree that would be part of the solution? Just have that clarity, just the clarity.
And within the second session, within, of course, we can be pragmatic. We need flexibility. You can't have a designed plan that goes over 25 years. So that is impossible in reality. But we have to keep the goals. We have to stick to the goals. That is impossible. That is important.
I just want to quickly check whether you believe that is the answer.
It's not a 10-second answer. Let me start by saying this.
He has to decide yes or no on tariffs.
Yeah, but he has 2 days to do that. Let me start by saying this. I think any sound business strategy of any industrial company must have a decarbonization plan. I believe it is the better business strategy. In our case, we call it Ambition 2039. We want to, by the end of the next decade, we want our whole value chain to be net carbon neutral. That is what we're gunning for, not just making the electric car. You have to look at the supply side of things, work with your suppliers. and how do you make sure that you engineer CO2 out of that product, but all the way to the product in use, so that if you charge at one of the Mercedes charging stations, we invest in charging infrastructure as well. I mean, we don't do that in the current paradigm. We don't have to build any petrol stations. They're there. But in this case, to avoid the chicken or egg, we are also investing in the charging infrastructure to create the confidence with the customer saying, oh, we got your back. This is going to happen. So that is fundamental to our business strategy. We believe in that. No ifs or buts, not negotiable. But one thing we also have to do, and this I think is the debate that is going on in Europe right now, and the statement that came out of the European Automotive Association, and here I represent the association view as opposed to our Mercedes very, very strong ambition. What you from time to time learn in a market economy is if you mandate the customer to do something as opposed to incentivize the customer to do something, it's sometimes difficult to do the equation without the customer. So you can then start having a debate. At the moment, the battery electric vehicle take rate in the year 2024, in Europe, it has stalled at around 10%. It's about the same thing for US. In many other markets, it's below. In China, it's much higher, although I can see a pivot in China for cost reasons away from the fully battery electric vehicle because it's economically difficult to make money with it. That more and more of the Chinese players are now going into hybrid, either range extenders with smaller batteries, or in the case of BYD, a very large piece of their sales is plug-in hybrids. So the Chinese take like a very pragmatic approach here. And even though intellectually I understand this, you got to put a stake in the sand. But what if the overall inertia of the system, the energy, the infrastructure, the consumer sentiment, what if that complete inertia does not keep pace with the ambition? The one risk you have, and I think this is a debate that we have to have in a pragmatic way, without for a second questioning the end destination, is if those two things don't go hand in hand, do you temporarily destroy your industrial, financial strength, which is not what's happening in the United States and certainly not in China? They don't make these absolutistic political decisions. They go with the flow. They're on the same journey. They have the same destination, certainly China, but they don't make those absolutistic way. Do we then stick very rigidly to what we decided 5 years ago if we notice that the market conditions don't support it? That is where the industry say we must have a conversation. Running a country or running a region is not the same thing as running a company. In a company, it's a 5-minute discussion if you see the market the market conditions change. You sit there in the boardroom and you go like, oh shit, what's going on here? We have to make a change. Politically, to admit that your assumption 5 years ago for this particular period in time might have been wrong, I think politically that's more difficult, but it doesn't make the problem go away. And I believe we need to have a constructive, fact-based discussion. Target, tick, but maybe we have to make some adjustments along the way. And I wouldn't argue that we have not put attractive products into the market. The European auto industry has put an enormous amount of product in a very short period of time in almost all segments, bar the entry segment. Why? Because the cost structure does not provide a profitable option yet. And I'm sure Oliver Blume would say that if he would sit here. And we are putting tens, if not triple-digit billion into the next generation. We have never stopped that, Mercedes. In spite of the market conditions, we have not stopped. We will go full force into the next generation. And that's my last statement on maybe the consumer sentiment. There could be one element here that the consumer is saying, well, listen to Ola Källenius, he's praising the next car he's bringing to the market, and that's supposed to be so much better than the one that he has now. Well, I'll wait for that. So the psychology of that, sometimes called the Osborne effect, the psychology of that maybe is also part of this equation. And it's not an easy equation to solve, but I do think we need to talk, because every single political goal, almost, that we want to reach is based on our ability to finance it. And if we don't have strong industry, the tax revenue is not going to be there to finance the rest of the political goals, including decarbonization. So you cannot do the one policy without having the industrial policy hand in hand, and they need to be in sync. That is the industry discussion that is going on at the moment.
I promise not to ask you a yes or no question next year. Time for our young voices, please. And please also say who your question is addressed to.
Yes, so hello everyone. My name is Nikan Wijaya, and I'm an executive MBA candidate from Sydney, Australia. So for the panels in general, I just want to get your feedback on my question. So I understand that there is a big migration from combustion engine vehicle to electric vehicle. However, we also have shifting preference towards car ride sharing and also lower car ownership among the younger generation. So my question is, how can the automotive industry not only remain competitive, but also grow in this potentially shrinking market, and also to continue to justify the investment in the industry? Thank you.
I'd like you to answer that question, Brian.
Very good. Sure. It's a very good question because I think if you look at the car share ride usage in China, I think it's actually reaching pretty stable levels in the recent years. And I think also I think the challenge for additional penetration comes from basically availability of labor, as well as whether the experience purely using car share ride is actually comparable to owning your own passenger cars. I think that there's a few factors that could potentially, I would say, transform that current sort of, I would say, balance. One is actually the advancement of autonomous driving technology. I think that is actually truly going to be transformative when you actually look at car share ride platform, combined with autonomous driving, and obviously in some areas already achieving level 4 or robotaxi-like capabilities. I would say in the few years, if that becomes a commercial reality, that will be actually a very important step to unlocking the potential of the platform, and also be significantly, I would say, friendly to environment as well as labor saving. The other thing I think that's very important is also understanding the shared mobility platform itself, how it actually going to continue to provide the services. In China, I think a number of areas that cause as hesitation or concern for growth is like safety, security, as well as the operator itself, whether the compliance. And I think that is something I think for a large market in China, they actually have to really figure out from the policy perspective. And for automakers, I think we are working closely to figure out what are the solutions we can provide to these platforms. For example, last year, what we did at XPeng is that we actually purchased the EV assets from Didi. Didi, obviously the largest shared mobility platform in China. They were trying to develop a vehicle, an electric vehicle for their own platform, but realized the difficulty of being an auto manufacturer. And then they partnered with us. I think they handed over the asset to us. And a year later, we launched that product to the Chinese market, and now seeming to become one of the most successful EV launches in the Chinese market. So I think collaboration between the automotive manufacturing and the mobility platform actually will yield significant benefit and also help pushing, obviously the overall, the technology as well as automotive advancements.
We'll be watching how that works out for Volkswagen. I just want to get one more question from my young voices in, because you are the people this is all about.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah, representing ESCP in Paris. And my question to you would be, so given the significant challenges electrical vehicles, battery sustainability, and then hydrogen inefficiencies in production and problems with logistics, what should be the primary focus of trade and investment strategies in the automotive industry? Should we prioritize development of one technology over the other, or is the hybrid approach the only one path forward? Thank you.
Maybe that's a great final question, actually, to ask all of you in one sentence, which approach should be taken. I'll start with you, Brian.
I mean, I think I agree with Ola and obviously the previous comments that consumer makes a decision, whether it's pure electric, hybrid, or other forms. I think consumer will consider the total cost of ownership, their environmental impact, as well as ease of use. I think at the end, automakers will only have to, can take the business forward based on what the consumer trend tells us. So for us, I think we're very open to modalities that I think consumer embraces. Obviously, we want to still focus on the path that creates the best efficient and most environmental friendly technologies.
So whatever the consumer wants, you are in the business of also framing the minds of consumers by convincing an electorate that what they want, what they should be wanting. So what would your
as Minister for Climate Action, I don't care, as long as climate neutrality becomes reality. So there's complete technical openness. As part of the government, I have to look to the finances. And of course, if the expectation is that publicly the infrastructure is financed, then the room for maneuver is limited. So we have to make a decision if we finance hydrogen filling stations or grid connections. In an ideal world, I would say we do both and maybe a third one as well. But in the reality, every euro counts. So therefore, we look to the markets. And my view is that the decision for, I call it now, normal mobility, so driving to work, bringing the kids to sports clubs, meeting some friends, and maybe 2-3 times a year, having longer distances, visiting your grandmother 500 kilometers or whatever down south in Germany. That will be electric. I think that decision is more or less made. There might be other examples, but they, I think, prove the general phrase that the basic infrastructure is electric. That is not true. That is not true for heavy vehicles and special engines in many kinds, but I think that that is the customers and the company's decision now, and therefore we lay the focus on charging stations and grid capacity. You probably saw that, but Christian Lindner, the German finance minister, at this table yesterday called the tariffs ridiculous, and I quote. So we're very curious about that German vote. Yeah, well, I agree. I'm completely against the tariffs. But the question is, how do we find the best way to overcome the situation, right? Right. Cecilia, so returning to that Young Voices question, it really is about how to attract the investment for which technology?
It is, and I agree with Minister that the future is electric, but then hybrid will be the way to go there probably for most companies. And also what the former young lady said about the new generation. I mean, young people increasingly are not taking their driving license. They're not buying cars. So of course it has to be combined with public investment in public transport, in buses, in other alternatives as well in combination to this transit. And that has to be electric and green as well. But hybrid will be a way to reach that goal.
Ola, you have the final word on this.
The market forces will figure it out. The target by 2050 by the Paris Agreement is what we're shooting for. I agree with what Minister Habeck said, that for passenger cars kind of means the main road right now looks like it's electric. Maybe on commercial vehicles the hydrogen will play a bigger role, and for industrial use. And maybe for aircrafts, we will also have in this technology openness zero carbon fuels, because there is no other technical solution at the moment. But don't stifle creativity and let the market forces figure it out, because technologically where we are in 10 years from now could be a different place than we are today. So let the market forces work.
The only thing, I completely agree, but of course there's a question for the public side to create an infrastructure that the market forces can work. That is the only thing I'm saying. And if money would pour down from the sky, no debate. But of course now we have to make tough decisions.
Not stifling creativity, that's the thought I would like to thank you all with. Thank you very much. And we've also learned at this table that a level playing field can tilt various ways as well.
But it was well balanced. Very balanced. A little tilted, but balanced.
Oops. I'd just like to ask you to remain seated for the debate with Lars-Hendrik Röller and President Emmanuel Macron, who should arrive here soon, and it will start in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.